Just one day as my mate. Human now. I want you. Forever. Evan Hale had never thought he would be chosen for anything unusual in his life. A human envoy to the Galactic Coalition, he was polite, ordinary, and competent enough to get through meetings without embarrassing himself. But nothing in his quiet, structured existence had prepared him for the invitation he received one morning. It arrived not as a formal letter or a holographic message, but as a shimmering projection, hovering in his quarters like a small sun. Evan Hale, voice spoke, both commanding and melodic. You have been selected for the Crithri Cultural Exchange. You will spend one day as the symbolic mate of Matriarch Sarith. Your cooperation is expected. Evan blinked. Symbolic mate. He asked aloud, as though saying it would make it less shocking. He had studied the Crithri culture for months, and though humans were slowly gaining respect in the Coalition, he knew enough to understand the weight of the term. The Crithri were not like humans. Bonding was not a casual gesture or a formality. It was sacred, serious, and permanent. He glanced at the hologram. The projection shimmered, transforming into the serene yet commanding face of Matriarch Sarith herself. Her large, deep-set eyes seemed to pierce through his very thoughts. Evan took a step back. Even in a hologram, her presence was overwhelming. Evan Hale, she said, her voice echoing in the chamber like the sound of 1,000 crystal bells. You will serve the Coalition not only as a human representative, but as a symbol of unity. One day only. After that, you will return to your duties. You will understand the meaning of your role during the day, and all necessary guidance will be provided. Evan's mind raced. He could say no, perhaps. But refusal carried its own consequences. Humans were still considered fragile by the Coalition's most powerful species. A refusal could make them look weak. Worse, it might even harm humanity's place in the Coalition entirely. I will do it, he said finally, his voice steady despite the nerves thrumming through him. The projection flickered and dissolved. Within minutes, he was given instructions, the time, the location, and the protocols he had to follow. He had exactly 24 hours to prepare, though preparation seemed almost impossible. How do you prepare to become someone's mate for a day, even symbolically, to a being who is thousands of years old, infinitely powerful, and utterly alien? When Evan arrived at the Crithri Palace, he was immediately struck by the difference between human architecture and Crithri construction. Everything shimmered and curved, impossibly smooth, as though grown from living crystal rather than built. Towers of translucent stone reached into the sky, and gardens floated above the ground without visible supports. The air smelled faintly metallic and floral at the same time. He was met by two Crithri aides who led him to a waiting chamber. There a dozen of the matriarch's trusted counselors observed him silently. Their long limbs and intricate tattoos made them appear both beautiful and intimidating. Evan did his best to remain calm. You will meet her now, one said. His voice was polite, but cold. The doors opened, and there she stood, Matriarch Sarith herself. She was taller than any human, with skin that gleamed faintly like polished onyx. Her eyes were golden, glowing with a light that seemed to pass through the soul. Evan felt his heart skip a beat. This was a creature humans had only seen in history books and holovids, a being whose reputation commanded obedience and fear across galaxies. And now, for one day, he was expected to. What? Bond with her. Walk beside her? Speak as her equal. Sarith regarded him silently for a moment. Then, without a word, she extended her hand. Evan hesitated. He had not been told whether physical contact was required, but something in her expression told him it was expected. He took a deep breath and placed his hand in hers. The moment their hands touched, a subtle warmth ran through his body, not like a human touch, but something deeper, almost magnetic. Do not fear, Sarith said, her voice softer than he expected. This day is a test. Not of strength or skill, but of understanding. You will see what humans can offer. I will see it too, Evan nodded, though he did not fully understand what she meant. They walked together through the palace, and everywhere they went, Counselors, guards, and diplomats fell silent. To them, he was a curiosity, a human, ordinary, and fragile, and yet here he was, walking beside the most powerful Krithri alive. The day began with formalities. They attended meetings, observed rituals, and exchanged words with other leaders of the coalition. Evan did everything he could to remain respectful and calm, answering questions about Earth, human customs, and the fragile political position humanity now occupied. He tried to speak with confidence, though inside, every fiber of him was on high alert. He could feel Sarith's attention like a weight on his mind, and occasionally, a strange sensation like she could sense his doubts and fears. By midday, he realized something incredible. The Krithri were testing him, yes, but in ways he could not anticipate. Every gesture, every word, even the way he responded to insults or challenges, was scrutinized. And yet Evan discovered he could pass these tests not by aggression, not by cleverness, but simply by being himself. By treating Sarith as an equal, listening to her ideas, and responding honestly. He began to feel a connection, forming a bond that was real, though he could not yet name it. At lunch, they shared a meal in the palace's floating gardens. The plants hovered and moved slightly in the air, glowing faintly. Sarith ate nothing, as she always had in public. But she watched Evan closely as he ate, asking quiet questions about human food, human life, and human thought. Evan answered as truthfully as he could, and though she asked about things he had never considered, war, lost leadership, he found, he could speak honestly. And she seemed genuinely interested. It was during this meal, alone with her for the first time without observers, that Evan first sensed the strange power of the Krithri bond. A feeling passed between them, not like friendship, not like fear, but something new, ancient, and unspoken. It was subtle, but undeniable. Sarth's golden eyes lingered on him longer than necessary, and he could feel an almost imperceptible pull, or a mental echo of her presence. The afternoon brought more formalities, and Evan began to feel fatigue. Walking beside a being like Sarth was exhausting in ways he could not explain. Every glance carried judgment. Every silence carried expectation. And yet he also began to feel a strange pride. Here he was, a human, standing in the heart of a civilization that considered humans insignificant. And he was holding his own. The final test of the day came during a council session. A representative of another powerful species attempted to humiliate him. Questioning humanity's reliability, loyalty, and survival capabilities, Evan's instinct was to panic or apologize, but he remembered Sarith's quiet gaze. He took a steady breath, answered clearly and calmly, and even managed a subtle hint of humor to ease the tension. The council chamber fell silent. Whispers spread quickly. The human had done what no one expected. He had not only survived the test, but had turned it into a display of quiet strength. S.A. Reth watched him with eyes that seemed to glow brighter, a faint smile touching her otherwise stoic features. Evan could not explain it, but for the first time, he understood a truth about this alien species. They valued inner strength and the courage to be oneself above all else. By acting naturally, by remaining human. He had passed a trial that centuries of Krithri warriors might have failed. As evening fell, the palace's lights shifted, bathing the floating gardens in hues of violet and silver. Sarith led Evan to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The stars above were unfamiliar constellations, glittering like diamonds on black velvet. Evan felt a sense of wonder he had not experienced before. And Sarith remained silent beside him. "You have done well today," she said softly. "But understand this. The bond has begun. It is not yet complete, but it is there. By tomorrow, much will change." Evan's stomach twisted. Change? I thought this was just symbolic. For one day, Sarith's gaze held his. One day can be enough for what the universe intends. Evan did not understand, but he felt the weight of her words. He had agreed to a single day, a harmless duty. And yet now, as he looked at the golden eyes of the Krithri matriarch, he realized that one day might never be just one day. Something had shifted. Something had begun that even he could not predict. The city lights shimmered below, reflecting in Saritha's eyes. And for the first time in his life, Evan Hale understood that being human in the Galactic Coalition was not just about survival or diplomacy, it was about being seen, truly seen, for who he was. And the consequences of that recognition were only beginning. The morning light filtered through the translucent walls of the Krithri Palace, casting soft glows of blue and silver across the floor. Evan Hale woke with a start, unsure if it was sleep or the lingering weight of last night's events that left him uneasy. The city outside shimmered like a sea of stars, alive with movement and sound unlike anything on Earth. But it was not the city that occupied his mind. It was Sarith, the matriarch, whose presence had left an imprint he could not ignore. The events of the previous day had been confusing enough. A symbolic bond had been meant to last only 24 hours. Yet Evan now sensed something more. He could not explain it, though a subtle pull in his mind hinted at a connection deeper than he had ever known. He brushed it off as stress, or perhaps the exotic surroundings playing tricks on him. Yet when he stepped into the palace corridors, a strange certainty grew. The Krithri bond was real, and it was already forming. Sarith waited for him in the morning chamber. Her posture as perfect and composed as ever, she did not smile. But Evan noticed the faintest twitch in her golden izah, signaled he could not quite decipher. "Evan," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of authority and expectation. "The day begins anew. The council wishes to review your progress. You will accompany me." Evan nodded. "Of course," he said, though inside he felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. Every step in this palace seemed to demand perfection, yet he also felt the strange assurance that Sarith trusted him more than he deserved as they walked together. The palace seemed alive. Walls shifted subtly, glowing with patterns that resembled flowing water. The floors beneath them hummed faintly, responding to their footsteps. Servants and guards gave way, bowing slightly, their expressions unreadable. For Evan, it was overwhelming, yet he felt a growing calmness, as if Sarith's presence anchored him. They arrived at the council chamber, where representatives from dozens of species awaited. The room was massive, circular, with a ceiling that seemed to float far above, reflecting the colors of the palace gardens. Eyes turned toward him, whispering among themselves. A human envoy in the presence of the Krithri matriarch was an unusual sight, and even more so when that human was now a bonded mate. The session began with formalities. The representatives discussed galactic trade routes, planetary disputes, and territorial claims. Evan listened carefully, noting how the Krithri's diplomacy was both precise and subtle. Sarith spoke with authority, her words measured and deliberate. When it came his turn to answer a question about Earth's contributions to the Coalition, Evan spoke with honesty. "Our species has endured hardship," he said. "But we survive because we cooperate. We adapt, and we learn from our mistakes. We may be young compared to many here, but we offer loyalty and ingenuity." A murmur passed through the chamber. Some representatives exchanged skeptical looks, clearly doubting the human's claims. But Saritha's eyes never left him. There was something in the way she regarded him that made Evan feel not judged, but supported. By midday, Evan began to notice something more unusual. When he and Sarith walked through the palace gardens, he could sense subtle ripples in his thoughts, almost as if her emotions brushed against his mind. It was fleeting at first, but undeniable. He glanced at her, and she caught his gaze, tilting her head ever so slightly. There was no explanation, no word exchanged, yet he felt a connection that both frightened and intrigued him. They paused by a fountain, its waters floating in midair, suspended by invisible energy. Sarith's attention turned inward for a moment, and Evan saw a flicker of vulnerability he had not expected. For a being so powerful, so revered, she carried a quiet loneliness. "You are stronger than I expected," she said softly, almost to herself. "Stronger than your species deserves. Or perhaps stronger than they understand." Evan hesitated. I only do what I can," he replied. "I'm just human." Sarith's gaze sharpened. Human, and yet enough. That is what matters. The afternoon brought more trials. A delegation from a neighboring system, jealous of the attention humans were receiving, attempted to undermine him. They asked pointed questions about Earth's military capabilities, economy, and loyalty to the coalition. Evan could feel the tension, the whispered calculations behind their words. But he did not falter. He answered calmly, clearly, and with reasoning that surprised even the most skeptical representatives, Sarth observed quietly, her golden eyes reflecting both pride and curiosity. Evan realized that the bond they shared allowed her to sense his honesty. She could feel when he was truthful, when he hesitated, and when he acted out of fear. And he, in turn, could feel the subtle warmth of her presence, guiding him, steadying him as the day wore on. Evan began to understand the true nature of the Krithri bond. It was not just a ceremonial formality. It was a connection of understanding, a recognition of strength, character, and courage. And it was something that could not be faked. He was not pretending. He was simply being himself, and in doing so, he had passed a test far greater than he realized. During a quiet moment, Sarith led him to a balcony overlooking the city. The sun nor what humans would call a sun cast violet and silver streaks across the skyline. The view was breathtaking, yet Evan's mind was occupied by the presence beside him. "You have surprised me," Sarith said. "Many humans would have faltered, given fear, or withdrawn. You did not. You stood, and you spoke, and you listened. That is rare." Evan swallowed, unsure how to respond. "I didn't know I was doing anything special," he admitted. "Special is not the word," she said. "Uncommon, unexpected, and effective." There was a pause, a quiet moment of stillness between them. Evan realized he had stopped feeling nervous in her presence. He was aware of her power, her history, and her judgment, yet he also felt a growing trust. And in that trust, a strange warmth, something human and yet alien, began to form. As evening approached, the council session reconvened. The challenges became subtler, less direct, yet more insidious. Some representatives tried to provoke him, question his loyalty, or cast doubt on his worth. Evan responded with calm reasoning, using logic, empathy, and his knowledge of both human and Krithri systems. Time and again, he found ways to turn potential humiliation into an opportunity for respect. Sarth's presence remained a constant guide. Occasionally, he felt a thought brush his mind that was not his own, a gentle suggestion, a nudge to speak differently, to pause, or to clarify. The sensation was fleeting but undeniable. Evan realized with a mixture of awe and fear that the bond they shared was already forming in ways he did not fully understand. When the session ended, Sarth did not dismiss him. Instead, she led him through quiet corridors, away from the eyes of the council and the whispers of other species. They stopped in a chamber overlooking the palace gardens from above. The floating plants glowed softly, casting shimmering reflections across the walls. "You have done well today," Sarith said. "But understand this, the bond you share with me is no longer symbolic. It is real. By tomorrow, the consequences will become clearer." Evan's stomach twisted. Consequences? I thought this was just one day. A symbolic role. Psst. One day can be enough to change everything. Be prepared, human. You will see. Evan felt a surge of anxiety. One day had already tested him in ways he could not anticipate, and now he sensed that the day ahead would bring challenges far beyond anything he had faced. Yet, at the same time, a strange determination began to form. He would not falter. He would face whatever came as a human, as himself. As they left the chamber, city lights shimmered below, alive with motion and color. The bond, subtle but undeniable, continued to hum in the background of his mind. Evan realized that humanity, so often underestimated, had a strength that even the most ancient species could not ignore. And perhaps, he thought, that was the lesson the universe intended for him to learn. The day ended with a quiet dinner in the floating gardens. Sarth did not speak much, but her presence was steady and watchful. Evan could feel her emotions brushing lightly against his mind: curiosity, caution, and a faint warmth that he did not yet understand. For the first time in his life, he realized that being human in a galaxy dominated by ancient powers was not just about survival. It was about being seen. And being seen could change everything. As night fell and the palace settled into a calm glow, Evan finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. The bond was real. The day was far from over. And whatever the future held, he knew one thing with certainty. He would face it fully. As a human, and as Sarith's mate, symbolic or otherwise, the stars above glimmered like distant promises, and Evan felt, for the first time, that the universe might be wider, stranger, and more incredible than he had ever imagined. The morning came quietly, almost gently, but for Evan Hale there was no peace. The city outside the palace shimmered as always, alive with alien architecture and floating gardens that defied gravity. But Evan's mind was restless. The bond with Sarith, the Krithri matriarch, had deepened overnight in ways he still could not comprehend. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but undeniable. Thoughts and feelings seemed to echo faintly between them, a current running under the surface of words and gestures. When he entered the grand chamber where Sarith waited, she was already there, standing tall and composed. Her golden eyes turned toward him, and for the first time, Evan noticed the faintest softness in her gaze, a quiet acknowledgement of something he could not yet name. "Evan," she said, her voice calm, yet carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The council wishes to review the outcomes of yesterday. Your performance has created questions. You will accompany me." He nodded, swallowing the nervous tension rising in his chest. Questions, he realized, meant scrutiny, judgment, and perhaps even suspicion. The Krithri were known for their strict adherence to rules, and a human being bonded to the matriarch was already a novelty. But as he walked beside her through the palace corridors, he felt a strange assurance. The bond was there, subtle and quiet, yet it seemed to guide him, steadying his steps. The council chamber was already alive with activity when they arrived. Representatives of dozens of species were seated, murmuring among themselves. When Sarith entered with Evan, the room fell silent. The human, at her side, bonded to the matriarch, drew glances, filled with curiosity, disbelief, and in some cases, quiet fear. Evan Hale, one of the elder council members, said, a being with glimmering wings and serpentine features, "Yesterday you performed admirably for a human, but today you will face questions that require more than courage. You must demonstrate understanding, loyalty, and insight into interstellar affairs." Evan nodded. "I will do my best," he said. The session began with technical questions about Earth's political systems, military readiness, and alliances. Evan answered carefully, honestly, and with a clarity that surprised even himself. He found that the bond allowed him to sense Sarith's subtle guidance, a thought, a slight shift in emotion, a hint of direction, but never an explicit answer. He had to reason for himself, and for the first time, he realized that being human did not mean weakness. It meant thinking, learning, and adapting, a representative from a nearby system. Clearly jealous of humanity's newfound attention, attempted to provoke him. "Tell us, human," the being hissed. "How can your species claim to be reliable when your history is full of conflicts and failures? What proof do you offer that your loyalty will endure?" Evan took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the bond steady him. "Our history may contain conflict, but it also contains survival," he replied. "We have endured challenges that would have destroyed other species. We learn, we adapt, and we value cooperation. Loyalty is not a matter of dominance, it is a matter of choice, and we choose it deliberately." A murmur of surprise ran through the council. Even Sarith, who rarely displayed emotion, seemed to regard him with a flicker of approval. Evan realized that he was doing more than answering questions. He was demonstrating humanity itself. And that demonstration, subtle as it was, carried power. After the session, Sarith led him to a balcony overlooking the city. The floating gardens shimmered in shades of blue and violet, the light reflecting in her golden eyes. She remained silent for a moment, studying him. "You have exceeded expectations," she said quietly. But understand, Evan, that the bond we share will bring consequences beyond these walls. It is no longer symbolic, it is real. Other species will react, and you must be prepared. Evan's stomach tightened. Consequences? Like what? Some will seek to challenge you, she replied. Others will attempt to manipulate or intimidate. But the bond is not just a mark, it is a shield and a connection. It allows you to face what you cannot face alone. He nodded, trying to absorb her words. The idea of protection from a being so powerful both reassured and intimidated him. He had not asked for this bond, and yet it had chosen him. And now, he understood, it could not be undone easily. The afternoon brought new challenges. Sarith guided him through the intricacies of Krithri politics, introducing him to leaders of various species, some of whom were openly hostile. Evan had to navigate their questions and provocations carefully. He relied on his instincts, his knowledge of humanity, and the subtle guidance of the bond. Each interaction tested him, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. He learned to remain calm under pressure, to speak with confidence, and to act with integrity. During a moment of quiet between meetings, Sarith led him to the palace gardens again. The plants floated gently in the air, glowing faintly in the dim light. Evan could feel her presence more strongly here, the bond pulsing softly, almost like a heartbeat in his mind. "Evan," she said, her voice low, "you may not realize it, but your actions have already altered the perception of your species. Others will watch you, doubt you, and perhaps even fear you. But you carry more than your own strength. You carry the potential of humanity itself." He looked at her, astonished. I'm just one human," he said. "No," she corrected, her eyes steady. "You are more than one human. You are a symbol. And symbols have power that even empires cannot ignore." Evan felt a swell of both pride and apprehension. To be seen as a symbol was overwhelming, but he also understood that he could not fail not just for himself, but for the species he represented. He would have to rise beyond ordinary human limits, relying on courage, intelligence, and the subtle connection he now shared with Sar. As evening approached, the council reconvened to address a new challenge. Reports had arrived of unrest in a nearby system. A faction opposed to the coalition's authority was attempting to seize control of strategic resources. The council debated responses, some advocating for force, others for diplomacy. Sarith turned to Evan. "What would your species do?" she asked. Evan paused. He could feel the subtle presence of the bond, guiding him but not dictating. He spoke carefully. "We would assess the situation, understand the motivations of all involved, and seek a solution that minimizes harm while maintaining stability. Force may be necessary, but it is not always the best first step. Cooperation and understanding can achieve results that brute strength cannot." A hush fell over the chamber. Some council members nodded, others looked skeptical. But the weight of his words carried authority, not because of the bond alone, but because they were thoughtful, honest, and human. Sarith's eyes glimmered, a silent acknowledgement of his insight. Later, as the day drew to a close, Evan and Sarith returned to the palace's upper terraces. The sky was alive with colors he could not name, and the floating gardens glowed softly in the evening light. Evan felt the bond more strongly than ever, a quiet hum that connected their minds and hearts in ways he could not fully understand. "You have done well," Sarith said, her voice almost gentle. "But know this, Evan, the bond will continue to grow. By tomorrow, the consequences will be undeniable, and your role will no longer be optional." Evan swallowed. The words sent a shiver down his spine. He had agreed to one day a symbolic duty, and now the bond seemed to stretch beyond that agreement. Yet, despite the fear, he felt a strange determination rising within him. He would face whatever came, relying on his humanity, his courage, and the connection that now linked him to the matriarch. As night fell, the palace settled into a quiet glow. The stars above reflected in Sarith's golden eyes as she regarded him. Evan realized that the bond was more than a mark or a ritual. It was a living connection, one that carried power, understanding, and responsibility. He felt both awed and humbled by it, knowing that his life, and perhaps the future of humanity in the coalition, had shifted irrevocably in a single day. Evan lay awake that night, thinking of the trials he had faced, the bond he shared, and the challenges yet to come. He knew that the days ahead would be harder, filled with scrutiny, danger, and difficult choices. But for the first time, he also knew that he was not alone. The bond, subtle yet undeniable, connected him to Sarith in ways that gave him strength, clarity, and courage. And in that quiet realization, Evan Hale understood something profound. Humanity, though young and underestimated, possessed a resilience and ingenuity that even the most ancient species could not ignore. The bond with Sarith was only the beginning. The universe was watching, and for the first time, humans stood not as a minor player, but as a force to be reckoned with. The morning air in the Krithri Palace was heavy with tension. Outside, the city shimmered as usual, floating gardens and crystalline towers catching the light and hues that seemed impossible to human eyes. Inside, however, Evan Hale could feel a storm brewing, one that no human had been prepared for. The bond with matriarch Sarith, now unmistakable and growing stronger, had drawn attention in ways that were dangerous. Several powerful species in the coalition were already questioning the wisdom of allowing a human to hold such influence. Sarith did not speak immediately. She moved through the corridors with her usual poise, her golden eyes steady, yet sharper than ever. Evan followed, careful not to falter. The bond pulsed gently like a heartbeat beneath his skin, guiding him, steadying him, yet whispering warnings he could not fully understand. When they entered the council chamber, the atmosphere was different from before. Representatives of multiple species had gathered, their expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. A sense of calculation filled the room. Political players moved like predators, circling prey, each evaluating how to manipulate, intimidate, or outwit them. Matriarch Sarith, a large, armored being with dark scales, said, "The presence of a human bonded to you raises concerns. Is it the Coalition's intention to grant a human influence over Krithri's decisions?" Evans swallowed. He had prepared for questions, but not open challenges. He glanced at Sarith, who regarded him steadily, and he felt the bond guiding his response, not telling him what to say, but giving him the confidence to speak. "I do not seek influence," Evans said, his voice calm but firm. "I am a representative of humanity. My role is to observe, to communicate, and to assist in understanding. Influence is not granted by position alone, it is earned by trust, integrity, and action. The matriarch's trust is a bond, yes, but it does not diminish the sovereignty of other species." Wow. Some seemed impressed. Others were clearly unsettled. A representative from a militaristic species leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "And if the human proves unreliable?" he demanded. Evan met his gaze steadily. "Then I will face the consequences. But I will not be underestimated because of my species. Humans survive not because we are perfect, but because we adapt, because we learn, and because we act when others hesitate." Saritha's eyes glimmered. There was a subtle warmth in the bond, a sense of pride that Evan could feel like a soft pulse in his mind. She spoke for the first time, her voice calm yet unyielding. "The human's bond is not a tool of power. It is a choice, a recognition of strength and understanding. Those who doubt this choice will see its merit or regret their doubt." The rest of the day became a battlefield of politics and subtle manipulation. Every discussion, every question, carried hidden motives. Representatives attempted to bait Evan, to provoke him into errors that could justify their skepticism. But Evan had learned to rely not on brute force, but on clarity, honesty, and the guidance of the bond. He answered questions with logic, revealing human ingenuity and adaptability, yet always remaining respectful of Krithri traditions. During a quiet moment, Sarith led him to the palace gardens, which floated above the city in layers of soft light. The plants glowed faintly, shifting in color as though responding to their presence. Evan had begun to understand that these gardens were not merely decorative, they reflected the subtle energies of those who walked among them. "You are doing well," Sarith said, her voice soft. "But there are those who will attempt to undermine this bond, to challenge your position, to cast you as a weakness. You must be vigilant, Evan frowned. They already are trying, he admitted. Even yesterday I felt their doubt. And today, it's stronger. The bond, she explained, is a shield, yes, but also a signal. It reveals the strength and character of those connected. Many will fear what they do not understand. You must not let fear dictate your actions. Evan nodded, feeling the subtle hum of the bond beneath his awareness. He had begun to sense more than Sarah's guidance. He could detect faint echoes of her thoughts' curiosity, caution, even faint traces of amusement. It was a connection unlike anything he had experienced, both exhilarating and terrifying. The afternoon brought a more direct challenge. A coalition representative, a tall, crystalline figure whose limbs refracted light into dazzling patterns, addressed the council. The presence of this human, they said, undermines centuries of Crithri tradition. If the matriarch allows a mortal of another species to influence decisions, what precedent does it set? Can any species now claim equality with the Crithri? The chamber held its breath. Evan could feel the tension, the expectation that he would falter. But he did not. Instead, he spoke calmly, carefully weighing each word. Tradition is important, he began, but so is the future. Strength is not measured by fear or age alone, but by the ability to adapt, to understand, and to act with purpose. Humans are young, yes, but our resilience and creativity allow us to offer value beyond tradition. The matriarch chose this bond not out of weakness, but out of recognition. That recognition is earned by action, not by decree.
Ow.
A hush fell over the council. Even the most skeptical representatives seemed to pause, considering his words. Sarith's gaze met his briefly, and Evan felt the faintest rush of warmth. A silent acknowledgement that he had succeeded once again. But success brought consequences. By evening, reports arrived of a small faction attempting to exploit the bond. They sought to manipulate human Crithri relations, to gain power, using misinformation and subtle threats. Evan listened carefully as Sarith outlined the situation. They believe they can use this bond against us, she said. They underestimate humanity and the strength that resides in both of us. You will assist in countering their plans, not with force, but with strategy and insight. Vaughn nodded. Then we act, he said. But carefully. If we make a misstep, it could escalate quickly. They worked together through the night, analyzing reports, decoding messages, and crafting strategies. Evan's understanding of Crithri systems grew rapidly, aided by the bond, which allowed him to sense subtle patterns and intentions he could not otherwise detect. Sarith's guidance was quiet, almost imperceptible, yet it shaped his decisions with precision. By midnight, they had developed a plan. Instead of confronting the faction directly, they would expose the misinformation, demonstrate humanity's value, and turn potential threats into allies. It was a subtle strategy, requiring patience, insight, and courage, qualities Evan had learned to trust in himself as they rested briefly in the palace gardens. The city below shimmered in the darkness, lights reflecting like stars in an ocean of crystal. Evan felt the bond more strongly than ever. It was no longer just a connection, it was a shared understanding. A bridge between two species that had never truly met before. You are learning quickly, Sarith said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. But understand this, the strength you display is not just your own. It reflects humanity as a whole. Many will watch, judge, and test. You must remain steadfast. Evan nodded, feeling the weight of her words. The responsibility was immense, yet he no longer felt fear. The bond gave him a sense of clarity, a quiet confidence that he could navigate challenges that would have overwhelmed him yesterday, late into the night. They executed their plan. Messages were clarified, misinformation exposed, and the faction's influence diminished without a single confrontation. The council and the coalition witnessed the results. Even the most skeptical representatives could not deny the effectiveness of Evan's actions. By dawn, the palace was quiet. Evan and Sarith stood on the highest terrace, looking over the city as the first light of morning touched the floating gardens. The bond pulsed gently, a quiet rhythm that seemed to echo the promise of what had been achieved. You have changed perceptions today, Sarith said softly. Not just of humanity, but of what is possible when strength is measured by understanding and action rather than tradition alone. Evan felt a sense of awe. He had begun this journey as a human envoy, uncertain and cautious. Now, after trials of diplomacy, subtle threats, and political maneuvering, he had begun to realize the true potential of humanity in the Galactic Coalition. The bond had not only connected him to Sarith, it had allowed him to see his species in a new light. To understand that their value was more than survival, they had the power to shape the galaxy through ingenuity, courage, and moral strength. Sarith regarded him silently, her expression unreadable, yet warm. Evan realized that the bond was no longer just a symbol or a ritual, it was a force, one that connected mind, heart, and purpose. And he knew, deep within himself, that tomorrow would bring challenges far greater than any they had faced so far. But for the first time, Evan did not fear them. He was not alone. He had the bond, he had Sarith's guidance, and he had the confidence that humanity's strength was real, enduring, and worthy of respect. The galaxy might challenge them, test them, and doubt them, but together, they were capable of more than anyone had imagined. And so, as the sun rose over the Krithri city, Evan Hale stood beside the matriarch, ready for whatever the universe would throw at him next. The bond pulsed gently between them, a promise of partnership, understanding, power that neither of them had anticipated. One day had already changed everything. Tomorrow would change even more. The morning sky over the Krithri city shimmered like liquid crystal, and yet there was tension in the air heavier than any beauty could conceal. News of Evan Hale, the human bonded to matriarch Sarith, spread across the coalition faster than any diplomat could have expected. What had begun as a symbolic day had transformed into a political earthquake. Representatives from countless systems had gathered, and some came not with greetings or curiosity, but with hostility. Too many, human holding even a fraction of Krithri influence, was intolerable. Evan stood beside Sarith in the council chamber, feeling the bond pulsing gently beneath his awareness. It was stronger now than ever, a quiet rhythm of trust, guidance, and understanding. He could feel her attention intertwined with his own thoughts, a subtle warmth that reassured him. Despite the storm of judgment around them, Matriarch Sarith, a representative, began, his tone sharp and accusatory. Your choice to bond with a human defies centuries of tradition. This cannot stand. Humanity is too young, too inexperienced, and their influence here is a threat to the stability of the coalition. Evan took a deep breath. He had faced scrutiny before, but this was different. This was not just curiosity or skepticism. This was a challenge to the very foundation of his bond, and by extension, humanity's place in the galaxy. He glanced at Sarith, who gave a barely perceptible nod. The bond strengthened his resolve. He would speak not as a human under scrutiny, but as humanity itself. My presence here, Evan began, voice calm and clear, is not about dominance or influence. It is about collaboration, understanding, and responsibility. Humanity may be young compared to many species here, but we endure, adapt, and learn. We do not seek control. We seek partnership. The bond with Sarith is not a tool, it is a recognition of trust and shared purpose. If that is a threat to some, then perhaps they misunderstand the value of cooperation. A murmur spread across the chamber. Some council members whispered, others exchanged skeptical glances. Evan's heart pounded, yet he felt a clarity he had never known. The bond allowed him to feel not only Sarith's confidence, but also the resonance of truth in his own words. He was no longer just Evan Hale. He was a human, speaking for a species often underestimated, standing strong in the face of doubt. The representative leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And if this bond fails? If the human proves unreliable, what then? Will the matriarch allow a single human to dictate Krithri policy? Evan met his gaze without hesitation. The bond is not a weakness. It is a connection. And connections require responsibility, honesty, and action. Humans may be underestimated, but we are not fragile. We endure not because we are perfect, but because we rise when others hesitate. The matriarch has chosen this bond because it reflects true strength, not tradition or fear. Sarah's golden eyes glimmered with approval. For the first time, some representatives in the chamber looked uncertain, their confidence shaken by the clarity and conviction in Evan's voice. The human envoy, once seen as inconsequential, now carried the weight of humanity itself. The council continued with debates. But Evan and Sarith were no longer simply participants. They were a presence that shifted the tone of the room. Representatives who had come to challenge them found themselves reconsidering, aware that the human bonded to the matriarch was not ordinary. Each question Evan answered, each point he raised, demonstrated logic, integrity, and a keen understanding of interstellar politics. By midday, the situation escalated further. A faction of militaristic species had attempted to spread misinformation, claiming that humanity sought to manipulate Krithri decisions for its own gain. Sarith brought Evan aside to review the reports. They believe they can turn the coalition against us, she said, her voice low, her expression serious. But they underestimate humanity and the bond. We will respond, but carefully. Strategy and clarity, not aggression, will reveal the truth. Avan nodded. The stakes were higher than ever. He had spent the previous days learning, observing, and acting under subtle guidance. But now it was time to apply all he had learned. We expose the misinformation, he said, determination hardening his voice. We show the truth clearly and calmly. We do not attack. They do not understand diplomacy as humans do. Together, they devised a plan. Evan would present evidence of the misinformation, supported by Krithri intelligence that only Sarith could provide. They would reveal the lies, demonstrate the effectiveness of their cooperation, and show the value of the human-Krithri bond not as a threat, but as a model of partnership. When they returned to the council, Evan spoke first, presenting evidence with clarity and precision. He spoke honestly, acknowledging human limitations while emphasizing resilience, adaptability, and the capacity for understanding across species. Saritha's presence was steady beside him, her subtle mental guidance reinforcing his confidence. By the time he finished, the room was silent. Even the most skeptical council members could not deny the logic, the clarity, and the integrity of his presentation. The misinformation was exposed, the factions' attempts at manipulation laid bare, and the value of humanity in the coalition was undeniable. A sense of relief washed over Evan, yet he knew the day was far from over. The bond, now fully established, carried consequences beyond politics. He could feel Sarith's thoughts brushing against his own, faint and warm, revealing her growing trust, curiosity, and something more, an emotional connection he had not anticipated. As evening fell, they walked through the palace gardens. The floating plants glowed softly, reflecting light in patterns that seemed to mirror the bond between them. Evan had begun to understand that the bond was not just a link of power or influence. It was a connection of understanding, trust, and even empathy. "You have done well," Sarith said quietly, her voice softer than he had ever heard. "The council has seen your strength, your wisdom, and your integrity. But understand this, the bond carries more than political weight. It carries personal consequence. It will shape not only how others see you, but how we see each other." Evan looked at her, feeling the gentle pulse of the bond. "I didn't expect this," he admitted. "I thought it was just one day symbolic now. It feels like something more." "It is something more," she said, her gaze steady, "and it will endure. You have proven yourself, not just to the coalition, but to me. That is rare, human." The stars above the palace shimmered as night fell. The city lights below reflected in Sarith's golden eyes, and Evan felt a quiet awe. The bond had begun as a symbol, became a challenge, and now stood as something profound, a connection that transcended species, tradition, and expectation. Suddenly, a warning flashed in the palace monitors. Another faction, seeking to capitalize on chaos, had moved against a nearby system. They intended to seize control before the coalition could respond. Sarith turned to Evan. "They will test you again," she said, "but you are ready." We act together as one, Evan nodded. For the first time, he felt fully capable, not just as a human envoy, but as a partner in a bond that carried influence, trust, and responsibility. Together, they coordinated a response, combining human ingenuity and Crithry strategy. Messages were sent, fleets repositioned, diplomacy applied in ways that neutralized the threat without direct confrontation. By dawn, the crisis was averted. The coalition witnessed the effectiveness of their cooperation, and even critics could not deny the results. Humanity's reputation had risen overnight, not by force, but by action, insight, and resilience. Sarith and Evan stood once more on the palace balcony, overlooking the city as the first light of the new day touched the floating gardens. The bond pulsed gently, a quiet rhythm of understanding and shared purpose. "You have changed the perception of your species," Sarith said softly, "and perhaps the perception of what is possible when two beings choose to understand each other." Evan felt a sense of awe, humility, and pride all at once. "I didn't expect any of this," he admitted. "I thought it would be one day, one task. Now, it feels like a lifetime." Saritha's expression softened, and for a moment, she allowed something human in her gaze, something warm, approving, and even affectionate. "Perhaps one day was all that was needed," she said. "You have proven that humanity's strength lies not only in survival, but in understanding, courage, and choice. That is the essence of the bond." Evan realized that the journey they had undertaken together, the trials, the scrutiny, and the challenges, transformed them both. What had begun as a symbolic day had become a connection that would endure, shaping the galaxy in ways neither could have anticipated. He looked at Sarith, feeling the quiet pulse of the bond, the warmth of her attention, and a deep respect that went beyond politics or strategy. "Then, we face whatever comes next," he said. "Yes," she replied, "together." And in that quiet moment, the stars above, the floating gardens, and the entire coalition seemed to acknowledge what Evan had already known. One human, bonded by trust and courage, had altered the course of events in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity was no longer underestimated. Humans were no longer observers. They were participants, innovators, and partners. And the bond with Sarith would stand as a testament to their potential. The day ended not with celebration, but with quiet understanding. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of human ingenuity and courage, and the matriarch's choice was no longer questioned. The bond between Evan and Sarith had become a symbol of what humanity could achieve when recognized, understood, and allowed to stand as equals among the stars. Evan Hale had started as a single human, chosen for a symbolic day. He ended it as a partner, a representative of his species, and a being connected to one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. The bond, once thought temporary, was now enduring. And together, human and Crithry, they would shape a future that was stronger, fairer, and filled with possibility.